The wind didn't howl in the San Juan Mountains. It screamed. Ryan Hale had been moving through the whiteout for 3 hours, and he'd stopped hearing it as noise 30 minutes ago. Now it was just pressure. A physical force that pressed against his Gore-Tex shell like invisible hands trying to shove him backward down the trail. The kind of pressure that made his jaw ache from clenching his teeth. The kind that turned every forward step into a negotiation with gravity. He shouldn't have been out here. That was the rational thought that kept surfacing through the tactical autopilot that governed his movements. 16 years with SEAL Team 6, and he'd never once ignored a weather warning. But 16 years of disciplined survival had ended 8 months ago in a VA hospital room with a Purple Heart he didn't want and a medical discharge he didn't know how to live with. So here he was, hiking a 14-mile loop in southwestern Colorado while a bomb cyclone turned the forest into a meat grinder. His left boot broke through the snow crust, 8 inches deep, maybe more, and his knee torqued slightly as he compensated. Not enough to cause damage. Just enough to remind him that his body wasn't government property anymore. Just enough to make him wonder if anyone would even find him if he didn't make it back to his truck. The thought didn't scare him. That was the problem. He adjusted the weight of his pack, a Mystery Ranch SATL loaded with more gear than any day hike required. 42 pounds of paranoia that felt like coming home. Inside, a blowout kit with QuikClot and Israeli bandages, 500 rounds of 9mm, 2 MREs, a Garmin InReach, a Katadyn water filter, and a Benchmade Adamus folder he'd carried through Ramadi. On his hip, a Sig Sauer P320 in a Safariland holster, riding beneath his jacket where the cold wouldn't affect the magazines. Overkill for a day hike. Perfectly reasonable for a man who'd spent 16 years learning that the worst day of your life always started as an ordinary one. The snow had erased the trail an hour ago. Now he was navigating by compass bearing and terrain association. 68 degrees northeast, keeping the ridgeline to his left, using the density of the lodgepole pines to tell him where the elevation dropped. Basic land NAV that his brain executed while the rest of him wondered why he was bothering. That's when he heard the dog. Not a bark. A whine. High and broken, barely audible through the wind. The kind of sound that bypassed his conscious mind and went straight to his nervous system, triggering responses that predated language. Ryan stopped moving. Listened. There. 20 meters ahead. Maybe 30. Something moving in the white. His hand went to the SIG without conscious thought. The draw was muscle memory. Thumb breaking the retention hood, fingers finding the grip, index finger riding the frame above the trigger guard. The pistol came up into a compressed ready position. Muzzle pointed at a 45-degree angle toward the ground, both eyes open. He moved forward. Slow. Deliberate. Each step placed carefully, weight distributed, knees bent, ready to shift in any direction. The shape materialized through the snow like something conjured from white noise. A dog. Belgian Malinois. 70 pounds. Lying on its side in the snow. Dark fur matted with ice crystals. Blood, Jesus, so much blood. Painting the white ground black beneath its ribcage. Ryan dropped to one knee beside it, the SIG still in his right hand, scanning the treeline while his left hand went to the dog's neck, fingers finding the pulse point beneath the jaw. Thready. Fast. Shock. The dog's eyes opened, dark and intelligent and completely focused on Ryan's face. Its head lifted 6 inches off the snow, and the whine came again. Not pain. Not fear. Urgency. The animal struggled to its feet, staggered 2 steps northeast, looked back at Ryan, whined again. Ryan's tactical brain cataloged the details in milliseconds. The wound was a through and through, probably 5.56 millimeters, missing the vitals by maybe 2 inches. The blood trail behind the dog stretched back into the white, already half filled with fresh snow. The animal had been moving toward something, not away from it, and it was trying to lead him. He should turn around, follow his own tracks back to the truck, call search and rescue from a position of relative safety, and let them handle whatever clusterfuck was waiting in the direction the dog wanted him to go. That's what the rational part of his brain said. The operational part, the part that had kept him alive through Mosul and Kandahar and a dozen other places that didn't officially exist, said something different. Someone shot a dog and left it to die in a blizzard. That meant someone dangerous was close. That meant someone else might need help. That meant the enemy was already here, and retreat wasn't an option because every direction was the X when the bad guys were already on the battlefield. Ryan holstered the SIG and pulled his pack around, digging for the blowout kit with hands that were starting to lose fine motor control from the cold. The dog watched him, panting steam into the frozen air, swaying on its feet but refusing to lie down. "Easy, brother," Ryan said. His voice sounded strange, the first words he'd spoken aloud in 3 days. "Let me work." He pulled out a roll of Kerlix gauze and a compression bandage, moving in close to the dog's side. The animal tensed but didn't snap, even when Ryan's frozen fingers pressed the gauze against the entry wound. Exit wound was cleaner. The round had tumbled slightly but hadn't fragmented. Lucky. If the bullet had hit bone, the dog would already be dead. He wrapped the compression bandage around the dog's chest, working fast, tucking and securing with the efficiency of a man who'd done this 100 times on humans. The dog stood perfectly still, like it understood, like it knew Ryan was trying to help. "You're a working dog," Ryan murmured, more to himself than the animal. His fingers found the nylon collar beneath the matted fur. Heavy duty, professional grade, the kind that had a name embroidered on it and maybe a badge number. Axel, Mesa County K-9 unit. A police dog, shot and abandoned in the mountains during a blizzard. The tactical situation just got a lot more complicated. Ryan secured the last wrap of the bandage and pulled out his InReach, checking the screen. No satellite connection, the storm was too thick, which meant no calling for backup, no GPS coordinates, no extraction. Just him and a dying dog and whatever fresh hell was waiting in the direction the animal wanted to lead him. Axel took 3 steps northeast. Stopped. Looked back. Ryan looked at his compass. Looked at the dog. Looked at the blood trail disappearing into the white. Every instinct he had, 16 years of training and experience and barely suppressed PTSD, said this was a trap. Said walking into an unknown situation with zero intelligence and no support was exactly how operators ended up in body bags. But he'd already made the decision. He'd made it the second he'd stopped to help the dog instead of walking past. Because men who left K-9S to die in the snow were the kind of men who deserved to meet someone like Ryan Hale in the dark. "Lead the way," he said. Axel moved. They traveled northeast for 22 minutes by Ryan's count. The dog moved like a ghost through the storm, stumbling occasionally, favoring its right side, but never stopping. Never looking back except to make sure Ryan was still following. The blood trail got fresher, brighter, less snow-filled, which meant they were catching up to whatever the dog was running toward. Ryan kept the SIG drawn now, carrying it in a two-handed grip, muzzle tracking wherever his eyes went. The storm was thinning slightly, or maybe they dropped into a valley where the wind wasn't as brutal. Either way, visibility had improved from 15 feet to maybe 40. Enough to see the light. It appeared through the trees like a single orange eye, warm and steady and completely wrong for this environment. No headlamps, no flashlights, just the steady glow of interior illumination bleeding through windows and painting the snow amber. The cabin. Ryan went to ground immediately, dropping into a kneeling position behind a deadfall pine, weapon up, scanning the structure through the blowing snow. Single story. Log construction. Maybe 1,200 square feet. 2 visible windows on the north-facing wall, both showing light. A door, solid, professional grade, the kind that cost money, slightly ajar. Smoke rising from a metal chimney, dissipating immediately in the wind. No vehicles visible. No cleared driveway. No power lines. Generator, probably. Which meant whoever was inside had planned to be here. This wasn't a hiking accident or someone caught in the storm. This was operational. Axel didn't stop at the treeline. The dog moved straight toward the cabin, limping badly now, leaving a steady trail of red in the white. It reached the door and pawed at it once. Whined, and something inside screamed. Not an animal. Not the wind. A human voice. Female. High and desperate and cut off mid-breath like someone had clamped a hand over her mouth. Ryan's tactical brain ran the numbers in less than a second. Unknown number of hostiles. Unknown number of hostages. No backup. No support. No intelligence. Standard rescue mission, then. Just like the old days. He moved. Ryan crossed the open ground in 8 seconds. A straight sprint through knee-deep snow, weapon up, eyes on the door, every sense screaming that this was the moment someone should be shooting at him. Nobody did. He reached the wall beside the door and pressed his back against the logs, controlling his breathing, listening. The cabin's exterior was rough-hewn timber, gaps chinked with mortar, the kind of construction that would stop sound from traveling. But through the partially open door he could hear men's voices, 2, maybe 3, low and professional, not panicked. A woman crying, trying not to, failing. Axel, standing in the doorway now, blood dripping onto the wooden porch, staring inside. Probably dead by now anyway. One of the male voices said, flat effect, no emotion, the tone of a man discussing a broken tool. We should have double-tapped the handler, too. Marcus said no bodies at the primary scene. Another voice responded. Different accent, East Coast, maybe Boston. Dog wanders off and bleeds out in the storm. That's natural causes. Cop freezes to death looking for his K9. That's tragedy. 2 bullets in the back of his head. That's a federal investigation. Ryan's jaw clenched hard enough to make his teeth ache. What about the women? The first voice again. Marcus wants them at the secondary location before we sanitize. Says the client pays extra for. The rest of the sentence disappeared beneath the sound of someone being hit. Open palm, hard enough to echo, and the woman's sob cutting off into silence. Ryan had heard enough. He pulled a fragmentary flashbang from his pack. An old habit, carrying one even on day hikes, because you never knew when you'd need to clear a room, and tested the weight in his left hand. The door was opening in, which meant he couldn't kick it. He'd have to pull it, throw the flash, and make entry before the inhabitants could respond. Standard CQB. Muscle memory older than most of his scars. He holstered the SIG, needed both hands free for this, and drew the Benchmade instead, thumbing it open with a soft snick that was lost in the wind. The knife was a backup, but in close quarters, steel was sometimes faster than bullets. 3 breaths, slow and controlled, oxygenating his blood, slowing his heart rate, entering the state of hyper-awareness that Team 6 instructors called Condition Black, and that Ryan just thought of as home. He reached across his body with his left hand and grabbed the door handle. Pulled. The door swung open, and Ryan saw the room in freeze frame. A living area. Stone fireplace burning low. 2 women. Young, early 20s, zip-tied to kitchen chairs, duct tape across their mouths, eyes wide with terror. 3 men in civilian clothes, jeans, tactical boots, fleece jackets, standing in a loose triangle formation. The nearest one, 6 feet from the door, turning at the sound of it opening. His hand dropping to the pistol holstered at his waist. No uniforms. No badges. Just 3 men who moved like professionals holding 2 women who looked like college students. Ryan threw the flashbang underhand, aiming for the center of the room. Then he closed his eyes and turned his head away from the door. The detonation was nothing. The flashbang didn't go off, because Ryan Hale hadn't carried a flashbang in 8 months. Hadn't carried one since his last deployment. Hadn't restocked his go bag because he hadn't planned on ever needing it again. His tactical brain had just written a check his equipment couldn't cash. The 3 men stared at the cylindrical object lying on the floor between them. Stared at Ryan standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the storm. Half a second of frozen confusion. Then everyone moved at once. Ryan surged forward, driving into the cabin, angling toward the nearest hostile. The one who'd been turning when the door opened. The one whose hand was halfway to his weapon. The Benchmade came up in an ice-pick grip, targeting the subclavian artery, but the hostile was fast, stepping back, getting his arm up to block. The blade caught meat instead of artery, bicep, not lethal, and the man grunted but didn't go down. His other hand came around with a closed fist, catching Ryan in the side of the head, and the world tilted slightly, stars blooming in his peripheral vision. Behind him, one of the other men was shouting, "Contact! Armed!" Ryan kicked the wounded hostile's knee sideways, felt the joint buckle, and the man went down. Then Ryan was moving again, dropping the knife, drawing the SIG in one smooth motion, acquiring the second target. A bald man in his 40s, ex-military written all over his posture, raising a Glock 19 from a thigh holster. Ryan's muzzle found center mass and he pressed the trigger twice. The double tap was textbook, controlled, precise. Both rounds hitting a 4-inch group in the hostile's chest. The bald man staggered back 2 steps, looked down at his chest, looked up at Ryan, and laughed. Body armor. Ceramic plates, probably. Enough to stop 9mm at this range. Fuck, Ryan said. Then the third man hit him from the side. A full body tackle that drove both of them into the wall beside the fireplace. Ryan's head bounced off the logs, his vision whiting out for half a second, the SIG tumbling from his grip and skittering across the floor. The third hostile was younger, stronger, had 40 pounds on Ryan and moved like someone who'd grown up wrestling. He got Ryan into a clinch, knees driving toward the groin, forehead snapping forward in a short, vicious head but that split Ryan's eyebrow and filled his left eye with blood. Ryan went with the momentum, letting himself fall backward, pulling the hostile with him, getting his legs up between their bodies. Basic jiu-jitsu. Create space. Control the distance. He kicked out hard, both legs driving into the hostile's chest, launching the man backward into the coffee table. With splintered, the hostile rolled, came up with his own weapon, a compact SIG P365, and Ryan didn't have time to think, only react. He rolled sideways behind the couch as the first shot punched through the cushions 6 inches from his head, sending up a puff of foam and fabric. This was going bad. Fast. Ryan's hand found the Benchmade where he dropped it, grabbed it, and came up into a crouch behind the couch just as the hostile rounded the corner, weapon raised. They were 5 feet apart, close enough to smell the coffee on the man's breath, close enough to see the pupils dilating with adrenaline, close enough for the knife. Ryan moved through the hostile's shooting stance, inside the weapon's arc, where the muzzle couldn't track, and drove the Benchmade up under the man's jaw. Felt the blade punch through soft tissue, through the hard palate, into the brain. The hostile's eyes went wide. His finger tightened on the trigger reflexively, and the P365 fired once, the round going wild, punching into the ceiling. Then Ryan twisted the knife and the man's legs gave out. He caught the body as it fell, lowering it to the ground, pulling the knife free, already turning to acquire the next. The bald man with the body armor was gone. So was the hostile Ryan had wounded with the first knife strike. The front door was swinging shut, letting in a blast of snow and wind, and the 2 women were still zip-tied to their chairs, staring at Ryan with eyes that couldn't decide if he was rescue or execution. Ryan's breath was coming hard now, adrenaline and altitude and the remnants of the concussion from the head, but all mixing into a cocktail that made the room tilt slightly. He pressed his palm against his split eyebrow, felt the blood. Not arterial, just a bleeder, the kind that looked worse than it was, and forced himself to think tactically. Situation report. 1 hostile dead. 2 wounded hostiles fled into the storm. 2 hostages secured but immobile. Unknown number of additional hostiles possibly en route. The cabin was no longer a safe position. It was a kill box. He moved to the women first, pulling the Benchmade again, cutting through the zip ties with quick, efficient movements. The duct tape came off their mouths carefully. Ripping it would hurt, and they'd been hurt enough. The first woman, blonde, maybe 23, wearing University of Colorado gear, started hyperventilating immediately. They killed him. They killed him. They killed. Who? Ryan kept his voice calm, professional, the tone he'd used 100 times with rescued hostages. Who did they kill? The cop, she managed. He pulled us over. They shot him. They shot his dog. We didn't do anything, we were just driving. The second woman, dark-haired, older, cut in. Are you going to kill us? Ryan looked at her, saw the calculation in her eyes, the same risk assessment he'd do in her position. Strange man, covered in blood, just killed someone in front of her. Valid question. No, he said simply. I'm getting you out of here. Can you walk? They both nodded. Then we move. Now. He crossed to where his cig had fallen, retrieved it, did a press check to make sure a round was still chambered, looked out the window at the storm, at the darkness, at the blood trail leading away from the cabin. His original plan, such as it was, had been to secure the cabin and hunker down until the storm passed. But the 2 wounded hostiles had fled, which meant they'd be coming back with reinforcements. And Ryan was down to maybe 90 rounds of 9mm and a knife against an unknown number of armed men who now knew exactly where he was. Tactically speaking, the situation was completely fucked. But he'd been in worse. Probably. Grab coats, he told the women. Anything warm. We're leaving in 30 seconds. Where are we going? The blonde asked. Good question. Ryan had a camp, a small, winterized shelter he'd built 3 miles southeast, hidden in a box canyon where the terrain provided natural cover and the forest was dense enough to break up thermal signatures. He'd been planning to spend a week there, alone, proving to himself that he could still function in the field. Now he'd be proving it while keeping 2 civilians alive and avoiding an unknown number of armed hostiles in a blizzard. Just like old times. Somewhere safe, he said, which was optimistic at best and a complete lie at worst. Move. They moved. Axel was waiting by the door, still standing despite the blood loss, despite the bullet wound, despite everything. The dog looked at Ryan and the 2 women, then turned and limped out into the storm, leading the way, again. Ryan followed, the cig up, scanning the treeline for movement, for muzzle flashes, for anything that looked like an ambush. Nothing. Just white and wind and the growing darkness as the storm swallowed them whole. They'd been moving for 40 minutes when the blonde, her name was Sarah, she'd finally told him, collapsed. Ryan caught her before she hit the snow, his arm around her waist, feeling her dead weight against him. She was shaking. Deep, bone-rattling tremors that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the fact that she was wearing a University of Colorado hoodie in a blizzard that had dropped the temperature to maybe 10 degrees. Hypothermia. Stage 2. Maybe 15 minutes before stage 3 set in and her brain started shutting down. I can't, she whispered. I can't. I'm so cold. The other woman, Keisha, economics major from Denver, was in slightly better shape, but only because she'd grabbed a fleece jacket from the cabin. She looked at Ryan with questions in her eyes that he didn't have good answers for. They were still 2 miles from his shelter. 2 miles through terrain that was getting steeper, through a storm that was getting worse, dragging 2 civilians who had no gear and no cold weather experience. This was how people died in the mountains. Ryan pulled Sarah against his chest, sharing his body heat, and made the calculation every operator learned to hate. Mission success versus acceptable losses. He couldn't carry both women. Not 2 miles. Not in this terrain. But he couldn't leave them either. Which left exactly one option. We're stopping, he said. Keisha stared at him. You said we had to keep moving. Change of plans. He helped Sarah sit down, her back against a massive lodgepole pine that provided maybe 6 inches of windbreak. Then he dropped his pack and started pulling out gear. His shelter was 2 miles away, but he carried enough equipment to build something that would work for one night. That was the operator's creed. Always have a backup plan, and always assume the backup plan will fail. He pulled out a small tarp, 8 by 10, olive drab, the same one he'd carried through Afghanistan, and started rigging it between 2 trees, creating a lean-to with the pine trunk as the back wall. The work was mechanical, familiar. His hands knew what to do even when his brain was running threat assessments and calculating how long before the wounded hostiles came back with friends. Help me, he told Keisha. She did, wordlessly, holding the corners where he indicated, gathering pine boughs to layer on the ground for insulation, working with the efficiency of someone who'd figured out that arguing wastes energy. Axel lay down beside Sarah. The dog's body pressed against her side, sharing warmth. The animal was in bad shape. The bleeding had stopped, but the shock was setting in, visible in the way its breathing had gone shallow and rapid. Ryan built a small fire, tiny, using a Bic lighter and fatwood shavings from his pack, keeping the flames low and contained, hoping the storm would disperse the smoke before it became a beacon. The warmth was psychological more than practical, but psychology mattered when you were trying to keep people functional. Drink this, he said. handing Sarah his Nalgene bottle. Small sips. Don't chug. She drank. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the bottle. Ryan sat back on his heels and did a tactical assessment of their position. The lean-to was adequate. Not great, but enough to keep them alive through the night if the storm didn't get worse. They had water. They had fire. They had minimal shelter. What they didn't have was security. He'd put them in a depression between two granite outcroppings, using the terrain to reduce their visible profile. But visible and defensible weren't the same thing. If the hostiles came back with thermal optics, they'd light up like a Christmas tree. If they came with night vision, the fire would be a perfect aiming point. And they would come back. Men who kidnapped college students and shot police officers didn't just give up because one of their team members got killed. Ryan checked his SIG-92 rounds left in his spare mags. Not enough for a sustained firefight. Barely enough for a disciplined ambush if he made every shot count. Who were they? He asked Keisha. The men in the cabin. She hugged herself, staring at the fire. I don't know. We were driving back from Telluride. Spring break. We got pulled over by a cop, a real cop, I think, because he had lights and everything. Then these other guys showed up. They shot him. They shot his dog. They put us in their truck and brought us to the cabin. How many trucks? 2. Black Suburbans. Tinted windows. How many men total? She thought about it. 5? Maybe 6? Some of them left before you showed up. They said something about the secondary location. Ryan processed that. Suburbans meant money. Multiple vehicles meant organization. A secondary location meant infrastructure. Probably another cabin or safe house somewhere in the area. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a planned operation that had gone sideways when a local cop had gotten unlucky. Did they say why? Ryan asked. Why they took you? Keisha shook her head. Then, quietly, one of them made a phone call. He said the client was going to be happy. That we were perfect specimens. Sarah made a small sound, half sob, half gag. Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. Human trafficking. That's what this was. College students disappearing during spring break, transported through remote mountain roads, delivered to clients who paid enough to make the risk worthwhile. Which meant the men hunting them weren't just armed. They were motivated. This was their business, their income, and Ryan had just killed one of them and stolen their merchandise. They'd come back hard. Get some sleep, he told the women. I'll take first watch. What if they find us? Sarah whispered. Ryan checked the SIG one more time. Functions check. Brass check. Condition 1. Then I'll handle it, he said, which sounded confident and competent and like exactly the kind of thing a Tier 1 operator was supposed to say. But inside his head, in the quiet place where the math lived, Ryan Hale was doing calculations that didn't add up to anything good. Ryan didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the granite outcropping, the SIG across his lap, watching the darkness beyond the firelight and listening to the storm try to tear the world apart. Every 30 minutes he did a perimeter check, moving in a slow circle around the lean-to, scanning for tracks, for movement, for anything that didn't belong. Nothing. Just white and wind and the kind of cold that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground. At 0300 hours, old habits died hard, and his brain still ran on military time. Sarah woke up screaming. Not loud. A choked, desperate sound that she cut off almost immediately, her hand clamping over her own mouth. But enough to wake Keisha, who sat up fast, eyes wide and searching in the dim firelight. Nightmare, Sarah managed. She was still shaking. I thought I was still in the cabin. I thought. You're safe, Ryan said, which was technically true in the immediate sense and completely false in the strategic sense. Are we? Keisha asked. She'd pulled her knees up to her chest, arms wrapped around them, and she was looking at Ryan with the kind of assessment that said she was done being passive. Safe, I mean, because you've been sitting there with a gun for 6 hours, and you haven't slept, and you keep checking the perimeter like you're expecting something. Smart. Observant. The kind of thinking that kept people alive. Ryan didn't lie to her. No, he said. We're not safe. The men from the cabin will come back. Probably at first light, because hunting in this storm at night is suicide even with night vision. We have maybe 4 hours before we need to move again. Move where? I have a camp. 3 miles southeast. It's defensible. We can hold there until the storm breaks and I can get a satellite signal. And then what? Then search and rescue comes and gets you. And I give law enforcement a very detailed description of everyone involved. Keisha studied him for a long moment. You killed someone tonight. Yes. Have you done that before? Yes. How many times? Ryan looked at her. At the intelligence in her eyes. At the way she was processing trauma in real time. Filing it away, staying functional despite everything. Enough that I don't count anymore, he said. She nodded. Didn't look away. Are you going to kill the rest of them? If they find us? Yes. Good, she said. Then she lay back down, pulling the emergency blanket Ryan had given her up to her chin, and closed her eyes. Sarah was staring at both of them like they were speaking a foreign language. Ryan fed the fire and went back to watching the darkness. At 0500, Axel woke him up. Ryan didn't remember falling asleep. That was a bad sign. Microsleep, the kind that happened when your body shut down whether you wanted it to or not. He came awake with the cig already in his hand. Finger on the frame, eyes scanning. The dog was standing at the edge of the lean-to, staring into the forest, every muscle rigid. Alert posture. Ryan heard it half a second later. The low growl of an engine. Distant. Maybe a mile away, maybe less. Hard to tell with the wind distorting sound. Vehicles. Multiple from the overlapping pitches. Coming this way. Wake up, Ryan said, his voice cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. We move. Now. The women came awake faster than he'd expected. That was good. Meant the adrenaline was overriding the exhaustion, and started gathering the emergency blankets while Ryan kicked snow over the fire and pulled down the tarp, stuffing everything back into his pack with practiced efficiency. 30 seconds. That's how long it took to erase most signs of their presence. Not good enough. The disturbed snow, the pine boughs, the fire pit. All of it screamed that someone had been here. But in a whiteout with 6 inches of fresh powder falling every hour, maybe it would be enough. This way, Ryan said, heading southeast, following the terrain, using the granite formations to break line of sight. They moved in single file. Ryan on point, Sarah behind him, Keisha bringing up the rear, Axel limping alongside, still bleeding, still refusing to quit. The engine noise got louder. Ryan risked a look back, cresting a small rise, getting a sight line on the area they just evacuated, and saw the lights. 2 vehicles, high beams cutting through the storm, moving slowly along what might have been a service road or might just be flat ground that happened to be wide enough for a Suburban. Searching. They were a quarter mile away. Maybe less. Ryan did the math. His group was moving at maybe 1 mile per hour through the deep snow. The vehicles, even in 4-wheel drive, were doing maybe 5. They had thermal optics, they had to, because nobody hunted humans in a blizzard without force multipliers. Which meant the moment Ryan and the women got within 100 yards of those vehicles, they'd light up on infrared like signal flares. They needed distance. Now, faster, he said. They tried. Sarah was flagging. The hypothermia from earlier had taken its toll, and she was moving like every step cost her, but she kept going. Keisha stayed close, helping when Sarah stumbled, not complaining about the pace. Behind them, the engine noise changed pitch, accelerating. Ryan looked back again and saw the vehicles split, one heading north, one continuing east, bracketing the area in a classic search pattern. Professional. Military. These weren't amateurs, which meant they'd find the lean-to site in minutes, would see the tracks leading away, would follow. How far to your camp? Keisha asked, breathing hard. 90 minutes at this pace. We don't have 90 minutes. I know. Ryan's brain was running scenarios, discarding them as fast as they formed. Fight, bad idea, 3-to-1 odds at minimum, no cover, hostages in the kill zone. Hide, worse idea, thermal optics would defeat concealment. Run, what they were currently doing, and it wasn't working, which left exactly one option. Misdirection. Keep going, he told the women. Follow the terrain down into that gully. He pointed southeast. toward a drainage that cut through the forest. And stay in the creek bed. Water's frozen, won't leave tracks. Follow it for 20 minutes, then angle east. You'll hit a box canyon with a rock wall on the north side. There's a shelter built into the base of the cliff. You'll see the camouflage netting. Get inside and don't come out until I come get you. Sarah's eyes went wide. You're leaving us? I'm buying you time. How? Ryan pulled 2 magazines from his pack and stuffed them into his jacket pockets. Checked the SIG. Did a functions check on the Benchmade. By making them follow me instead of you, he said. Keisha grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. That's suicide. That's tactics, Ryan corrected. They're hunting us as a group. I split off, they have to make a choice. Follow the tracks that split away or stick with the primary trail. Basic human nature says, they follow the threat. And I'm the threat. You can't fight all of them. Don't have to. Just have to keep them busy long enough for you to get clear. He looked at Axel. The dog was staring at him with those dark, intelligent eyes, and Ryan had the irrational thought that the animal understood exactly what he was planning. Go with them, Ryan told the dog. Protect them. Axel didn't move. That's an order. The dog sat down. Stubborn bastard. Ryan didn't have time to argue with a Belgian Malinois. He turned to the women. You have 5 minutes before they find our campsite. Use them. Move fast. Don't stop. Don't come back for me. What if you don't make it? Sarah whispered. Ryan smiled. Probably didn't look reassuring. Then you tell search and rescue everything you saw, and you make sure the people who did this spend the rest of their lives in prison. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and ran, not southeast toward his camp, but north, perpendicular to their previous path, making it obvious. Making it loud. Breaking through the snow with heavy steps that would show up like neon signs on thermal imaging. Making himself the bait. Behind him, he heard Keisha say something to Sarah. Heard them start moving. Heard Axel's claws scrabbling on ice as the dog followed the women instead of him. Good. Ryan ran for 300 yards, then cut west, looping back toward the vehicles. Toward the enemy. Time to go hunting. The first hostile died without ever seeing Ryan. It was pure luck or pure stupidity on the hostile's part. The man had dismounted from the lead Suburban and walked 20 yards into the treeline, probably to take a piss, and Ryan had been in exactly the right position to watch it happen through a gap in the pines. The hostile was armed. A compact AR-15 variant slung across his chest, suppressor attached, and wearing quality cold weather gear. Professional loadout. The kind that cost money. He was also alone, which was a tactical error that was about to prove fatal. Ryan closed the distance in 6 seconds. Silent. Fast. The Benchmade came out and went in, kidney shot, angled up, severing the renal artery, and the hostile's knees buckled. Ryan caught him, guided him down, one hand over the man's mouth to muffle any sound, waiting for the light to leave his eyes. Took 11 seconds. Ryan lowered the body into the snow, grabbed the AR-15, and did a press check. Suppressed 5.56 with a loaded 30-round magazine and 2 more mags on the hostile's chest rig. Night vision monocular mounted on a skull crusher. Motorola radio clipped to his collar. The radio crackled. Positions. North clear. A voice responded. East clear. Silence. Then, Garcia status? Garcia was the hostile Ryan had just killed. Garcia wasn't responding. Garcia, radio check. More silence. Ryan unclipped the radio from Garcia's body and pressed the transmit button. Contact, he said, keeping his voice low, distorted. Movement. Southeast drainage. He dropped the radio in the snow and moved. The lie would buy him maybe 3 minutes. Enough time for the other hostiles to regroup, to redirect their search toward the drainage where Ryan had sent the women, to waste precious time and resources chasing a ghost. And it would tell them that someone was actively hunting them. That was the psychology of asymmetric warfare. Make the enemy afraid of the dark. Make them question every shadow. Make them realize that the hunter had become the hunted. Ryan moved through the forest like smoke, using the terrain, staying off the ridgelines where he'd be silhouetted, avoiding the low ground where tracks would show. He was running combat intervals now. Sprint for 30 seconds, drop into cover, observe, orient, decide, act. ODA loop. Boyd's gift to tactical thinking. He found the second hostile 8 minutes later, moving through the storm with his weapon up, scanning for threats. This one was smarter, sticking to cover, using the trees, moving in short bounds. Almost professional. Almost. Ryan let him pass. Waited. Stepped out behind him and put 2 rounds from the suppressed AR into the back of his head. The hostile dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Ryan was already moving, because suppressed didn't mean silent, and someone would have heard. The radio on his chest crackled. Shots fired! Shots fired! Alvarez is down. Where? Grid 7-3. Near the Jesus, he's headless. Ryan smiled. Not because it was funny. Because fear was an operational tool, and terror was a force multiplier. He keyed the radio again. 2 down, he said in his own voice. Clear. Calm. How many of you want to be 3? Silence on the other end. Then a new voice. Older, controlled, the kind of voice that gave orders instead of taking them. Who is this? Wrong question, Ryan said. Right question is, are you willing to die for whatever you're getting paid? Big talk from one man. Garcia thought so too. Right up until he pissed himself and bled out in the snow. More silence. Ryan was moving while he talked, circling back toward where the vehicles had been parked, using the conversation to mask his movement. The storm was getting worse, visibility down to maybe 20 feet now, which meant thermal optics were going to be their primary sensor, which gave him an idea. Here's the deal, Ryan said into the radio. You leave. Right now. Get in your vehicles, drive away, and this ends. Nobody else dies. You get to go home and explain to whoever signs your checks that you ran into someone who had a worse day than you did. And the women? Not your concern anymore. The older voice laughed. Actually laughed. You don't understand who you're dealing with. Yeah, I do, Ryan said. You're mercenaries. Private contractors. Probably ex-military, probably hardened, probably expensive. But you're not operators. Real operators don't leave their radios on unsecured frets. Real operators don't send their men into the woods alone. And real operators sure as hell don't hunt civilians for money. You're going to die out here. Maybe, Ryan admitted. But I'm taking at least 2 more of you with me. Maybe 3 if I'm having a good day. So do the math, whatever you're getting paid. Is it worth a 33% casualty rate? He clicked off the radio and pulled the battery, cutting the transmission. Let them think about that. Let them run the numbers. Let them be afraid. Then he saw the thermal scope glint through the trees, a momentary reflection of ambient light, there and gone, and realized they'd stopped talking because they'd started hunting. Ryan dropped flat into the snow half a second before the bullet passed through the space his head had occupied. The shot was suppressed. Professional. Aimed center mass at where his thermal signature should have been. But Ryan had been wearing Garcia's cold weather gear over his own, layering insulation, and he'd been moving at ground level where his heat signature was partially masked by the frozen earth. Partial concealment. Not perfect, but enough to throw off the shot by 6 inches. He rolled left into a depression, scanning for the shooter. There. 40 yards northwest. Prone position behind a deadfall. Good cover. Good angles. Ryan couldn't get a clean shot without exposing himself. Stalemate. Except Ryan had been in this exact tactical situation in Mosul in 2017, and he'd learned a trick from an Iraqi sniper who'd lasted 6 months against JSOC before someone finally put him down. Ryan pulled the magazine from Garcia's AR, pulled out 5 rounds, and started pushing them into the snow in a rough circle around his position. Then he waited. The thermal scope would be painting him right now. A hot spot in the cold, motionless, waiting. The shooter would be settling in, controlling his breathing, preparing for a follow-up shot. Ryan pulled out his lighter. Sparked it once. Let the flame go. Sparked it again. Let it burn for 2 seconds. The shooter would see it. Would think Ryan was trying to start a fire. Would think he was panicking, burning his cover. Would take the shot. The round hit 4 inches to Ryan's left, kicking up snow. And Ryan pressed the lighter flame to the first round he'd planted in the snow. The 5.56 cartridge, exposed to direct flame, cooked off. Not the same as being fired from a chamber, but enough to make a bang and send the bullet spinning randomly into the air. Then the second round went off. Then the third. Suddenly the air was full of noise and flying brass and the thermal signature of multiple heat sources blooming all around Ryan's position. The shooter would see it as chaos. Multiple hostiles. Suppressing fire. Would panic. Ryan counted to 3, giving the shooter time to make a mistake, and then broke from cover, moving low and fast, angling away from the deadfall, using the confusion to close the distance. The shooter broke position. Stood up. Started to relocate. Fatal error. Ryan's AR came up and he fired on the move, 3 shots center mass, watching the hostile stagger and fall and not get back up. 3 down. Ryan breathed. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Controlling the adrenaline dump. Staying functional. His radio was dead. But theirs weren't. Which meant they knew. 3 men down. 1 hostile still active. The math had changed. Ryan moved toward the vehicles, following his original plan because plans were useless but planning was essential, and right now he needed to remove their mobility, when Axel appeared out of the snow like a ghost. The dog shouldn't have been here. Should have been with the women. Should have been following orders. But Axel was staring past Ryan, hackles raised, teeth bared. Warning. Ryan turned. The bald man from the cabin, the one Ryan had shot twice in the chest, the one who'd laughed because he'd been wearing body armor, was standing 15 feet away with a pistol aimed at Ryan's head. "Drop it," the man said. Ryan didn't move. "I said drop the fucking weapon." Ryan's AR was pointed at the ground. No way to bring it up before the hostile fired. No way to dive for cover before taking a round to the head. Tactically, he was done. "The women," the bald man said. "Where are they?" Ryan smiled. "Gone." "That's a lie. They're not at the drainage. We checked. Which means you misdirected us. Which means they're somewhere close. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and if you don't answer, I'm going to shoot you in the stomach and let you bleed out while I find them myself." "You won't find them. I've got thermal optics, asshole. I'll find them in 20 minutes. Not if you're dead." The bald man's finger tightened on the trigger. "You're not in a position to." Axel moved. The dog had been motionless, perfectly still, waiting, and when it moved, it was pure kinetic violence. 70 pounds of muscle and teeth launching across 15 feet of space, covering the distance before the hostile could turn, jaws clamping down on the man's gun arm. The pistol discharged, wild shot, punching into a tree somewhere to Ryan's left. And then the bald man was screaming, trying to shake the dog off, bringing his other hand around to strike at Axel's wounded side. Ryan didn't give him the chance. He closed the distance in 2 steps and put the AR's muzzle against the hostile's temple. "Call them off," Ryan said. "All of them, right now, or I scatter your brains across this forest." The bald man's eyes were wide, panicked. They don't answer to." "Then you're no use to me." "Wait." Ryan pulled the trigger. The shot was clean. Efficient. The kind that didn't leave room for suffering. The body fell. Axel released the dead man's arm and sat down, panting, bleeding from the exertion, looking at Ryan with those dark eyes that had seen too much. "Good boy," Ryan said quietly. The dog's tail thumped once against the snow. Then the world lit up with muzzle flashes as someone opened up full auto from the treeline. Ryan and Axel moved together. Pure instinct, no communication needed. Diving behind the nearest Suburban as rounds punched into the vehicle's body panels. The distinctive thwack 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 of suppressed automatic fire, maybe 20 rounds, walking across the SUV from front to back. Professional suppressing fire, keeping Ryan pinned while someone flanked. Classic 2-man ambush. Ryan counted the seconds. 3, 4, 5. The firing stopped, magazine change, and Ryan popped up, acquired the muzzle flash location through the storm, and sent 6 rounds downrange. Didn't wait to see if he'd hit. Dropped back into cover. Return fire came immediately. Heavier now. Multiple weapons. At least 2 hostiles, maybe 3. He'd killed 4, which meant there were at least 2 more. Bad math. Ryan did a tactical reload. Dropped the partial mag, seated a fresh one, tucked the partial into his pocket, and scanned for options. The Suburban's gas tank was on the passenger side. Armored windows, he could tell by the thickness. Probably B6 rated, enough to stop rifle rounds. The engine was still running, keys in the ignition. An idea formed. Terrible idea. High risk. Exactly the kind of thing that got operators killed. But high risk was better than no risk, and sitting here waiting to be flanked was a no-win scenario. "Stay," he told Axel. The dog stayed. Ryan moved to the driver's door, staying low, using the engine block for cover. Pulled it open. Slid into the seat. More rounds punched into the vehicle. They'd seen him move, but the armored glass held. Spiderweb cracks, but no penetration. He slammed the Suburban into drive and punched the accelerator. The vehicle surged forward through the deep snow, four-wheel drive clawing for traction, engine roaring. Ryan kept his head below the dashboard, steering blind, using the tree trunks flashing past in his peripheral vision to maintain direction. He was aiming for the muzzle flashes, for the hostiles who were dug in and firing and not expecting a 2-ton battering ram to come screaming out of the blizzard. Impact. The Suburban's reinforced bumper caught something solid. Probably a person, possibly a tree, definitely not good for whatever it hit, and the vehicle bucked violently. Ryan cranked the wheel, felt the rear end slide, brought it back under control, kept going. Behind him, someone was screaming, high-pitched, panicked, the kind of scream that said broken bones and internal injuries. Ryan didn't stop. He drove for another 30 seconds, putting distance between himself and the ambush site, then slammed on the brakes, threw the Suburban into park, and rolled out of the vehicle with the AR up. Scanning. Listening. The screaming had stopped. The forest was quiet except for the wind and the engine idling and the sound of Ryan's breathing, harsh and controlled inside his chest. He moved back toward the ambush site, using the vehicle's tire tracks for navigation, weapon up, finger on the trigger. Found the first body 20 yards from where the Suburban had stopped. One of the hostiles, mid-30s, ex-military build, crushed pelvis, probably severed femoral artery. Dead. 5 down. Ryan kept moving. Found the second hostile 40 yards further back, trying to crawl away through the snow, leaving a blood trail like a paintbrush. When he saw Ryan, he rolled onto his back, fumbling for a sidearm that wasn't there anymore. "Don't," the hostile managed, blood on his lips, sucking chest wound. "Please. I'm just a contractor. I didn't know what this was." Ryan knelt beside him, checked his wounds, punctured lung, maybe nicked the subclavian. 5 minutes, maybe less. "How many?" Ryan asked. "How many what? How many more of you?" The hostile coughed blood. Just one. Marcus. He's the handler. He's at the secondary location. Please. I need a doctor." "Where's the secondary location?" "East. 10 miles. Old mining camp. Please." The hostile's eyes went unfocused. His breathing stopped. Ryan stood. 6 down. 1 left. And 2 women waiting in a box canyon for a rescue that might not come if Ryan didn't finish this. He walked back to where Axel was waiting. The dog had moved from the ambush site to sit beside the Suburban, patient and alert despite the blood loss, and knelt down, checking the bandages. Still holding. Barely. "You should be dead," Ryan told the dog. Axel's tail thumped once. "Yeah," Ryan said. "Me too." He loaded Axel into the Suburban's back seat, then climbed into the driver's seat and pointed the vehicle southeast, toward his camp, toward the women, toward whatever came next. The storm was breaking. Through the windshield, Ryan could see patches of sky, not clear but thinner, the kind of weather that meant satellites might be able to get a signal. He pulled out his InReach and powered it on. Watched the device search for satellites. Found them. Signal strength. 60%. Enough. Ryan typed out a message. Officer down. Multiple hostiles Kia. 2 civilians need immediate extraction. Coordinates attached. Armed response required. He hit send. Watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. Message sent. Now all he had to do was keep everyone alive until help arrived. Ryan found the women exactly where he'd told them to go. The box canyon was a natural fortress. Granite walls on 3 sides, a narrow entrance that could be covered with 1 rifle, and his camp built into the base of the north cliff like a burrow. The camouflage netting he'd strung across the entrance had collected enough snow to make the shelter nearly invisible from more than 20 feet away. He'd built it 3 months ago, during a moment of clarity that had felt like paranoia at the time. Now it felt like providence. Sarah and Keisha were inside, wrapped in emergency blankets, huddled around a small propane heater that was doing its best to warm the 12 by 12 space. They looked up when Ryan pulled back the netting, and the relief on their faces was almost painful to see. "You're alive," Sarah said. Ryan nodded, set the AR against the wall, helped Axel inside. "Is it over?" Keisha asked. "For you, yes. For me." Ryan pulled out his InReach, showed them the message confirmation. "Search and rescue is en route. Maybe 2 hours, depending on how fast they can get birds in the air. Until then, we sit tight." "What about the men?" "Dead. All except one, and he's 10 miles away at a location they called the secondary site. I sent the coordinates to law enforcement. They'll handle it." Keisha studied his face. "You're not staying, are you? When SR gets here." "Smart. Too smart." Ryan didn't answer directly. Instead, he started breaking down his camp, packing gear, cleaning weapons, erasing the evidence that someone had been living here. The movements were automatic. Muscle memory from 100 exfiltrations. "Why?" Sarah asked. "You saved us. You're a hero." "You should." "I'm not a hero," Ryan interrupted, his voice flat. "I'm a guy who happened to be in the right place at the right time. And heroes stick around to get thanked. I don't do that." "Because you're wanted?" Keisha guessed. "Because I'm tired," Ryan corrected. "And because the second I give a statement to law enforcement, I become part of a case file. Part of an investigation. Part of the system. And I didn't leave the teams just to trade one bureaucracy for another." He finished packing, shouldered his ruck, looked at the 2 women. "When SAR gets here, tell them everything. Tell them about the cabin, about the men, about the secondary location. Tell them a hiker found you and helped you survive the storm. They'll ask for a description. Make it vague. Say the storm was bad. You couldn't see details." "They won't believe that," Keisha said. "They don't have to believe it. They just have to write it down." He pulled out a waterproof notebook from his pack, tore out a page, and wrote quickly. "Mesa County K-9 unit. Officer down. Dog survived. Recommend full honors for K-9 Axel. Handler died protecting civilians." He handed the note to Sarah. "Give this to whoever runs the K-9 unit. Make sure they know." Axel had been lying by the heater, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Now the dog lifted its head, watching Ryan with that unsettling intelligence. "Can't take you with me," Ryan said quietly. "You need a vet. Need surgery. Need care I can't give you." The dog's tail thumped once against the floor. Ryan knelt down, ran his hand over Axel's head, scratched behind the ears. "You did good, brother. Better than good. You saved them. Saved me. That's a full career right there." He stood, pulled the netting aside. "Wait," Keisha said. "At least tell us your name. Your real name." Ryan looked at her. Sarah. At the box canyon that had been his sanctuary and was now just another place he was leaving behind. "Does it matter?" he asked. "It does to us," Sarah said. "You saved our lives. That matters." Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Then Hale. "Ryan Hale." "Thank you, Ryan Hale," Keisha said. He nodded, stepped through the netting. Heard Sarah say something behind him, maybe goodbye, maybe something else, but he was already moving, following the canyon wall, heading for the high ground where the storm was breaking and the sky was clearing, and somewhere in the distance, helicopters were spinning up. He'd be gone before they arrived. That was the plan. That had always been the plan. 3 months later, Ryan Hale sat in a different cabin. This one in Montana, even more remote than the last, and read the news on his tablet. Trafficking ring dismantled. 6 dead. 1 arrested in multi-state operation. The article had details. Arrests, indictments, a corrupt sheriff's deputy, a network that had been operating for 5 years. 17 missing persons cases that were suddenly solved. And buried in the middle of the story, a single paragraph. Authorities credit an anonymous individual with rescuing 2 victims and providing critical intelligence that led to the arrests. When asked for more information, investigating officers declined to comment, citing operational security. Ryan closed the tablet, drank his coffee, looked out at the mountains. Somewhere in Mesa County, Colorado, a Belgian Malinois named Axel was recovering from surgery. The article had mentioned that too. Despite his injuries, K9 Axel is expected to make a full recovery and return to active duty. Good. The world needed more good dogs. Ryan's InReach chirped. New message. He picked it up, expecting spam. Got something else entirely. Mr. Hale. This is Deputy Director Morrison, FBI. We have questions about Colorado. No charges. Just questions. If you're willing to talk, respond to this message. If not, we understand. Either way, thank you for your service. Both kinds. Ryan stared at the message for a long time. Then he deleted it. Stood up. Pulled on his pack. Checked his SIG. The mountains were calling. The weather was clear. And somewhere out there, someone probably needed help. Ryan Hale stepped out into the wilderness and disappeared. The way ghosts do. The way operators should. The envelope arrived at the FBI field office in Denver with no return address. Inside, a flash drive, a handwritten note, and a dog tag. The note read, "There are others. More locations. More networks. The flash drive has everything I found. Good hunting. RH." The dog tag belonged to a SEAL who'd been declared MIA in 2019 and presumed Kia in 2021. The flash drive contained 38 gigabytes of intelligence on human trafficking networks across 7 states. Deputy Director Morrison held the dog tag for a long time. Then he smiled. "Good hunting indeed," he said, and got to work.